If you want to get access to over $250,000 in 0% interest business credit funding, then you need to understand the secret list that the bank's underwriting team looks at to determine if you could even pre-qualify to work with them. There's a lot of factors that go into this, but I'm going to go through in detail and explain each of the 9 pre-qualifying factors that will get you in the door with getting this massive amount of business credit funding. Make sure to stick with me to the very end because I actually have a super secret surprise and hookup for anybody who stays to the end and subscribes, so stick it out. And as usual, this is MTV. The M is for Miggle, money, motivation. Let's get into it. Number 1 pre-qualifying factor they're going to look at is pretty obvious. They're going to be looking at your FICO score. They're going to be wanting to look at either Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax, depending on the bank. Now, that's pretty obvious. You need to have your FICO in check. But what a lot of people don't understand is they think, hey, if I have a really high FICO score, that means I'm going to get really high credit limits. But unfortunately, getting funding is not that easy. Really, all you need to understand is your FICO score is get your foot in the door with the banks to at least consider you, and that is it. All they're looking for is for you to have at least a 700 FICO score and up. If you don't have a 700 and up FICO score, don't worry, you're not completely screwed. Later, I'm going to be posting a free roadmap on how to get an 800 plus FICO score. So stay tuned for that. The second thing that banks are going to look at to pre-qualify to get over $250,000 in funding is how many personal credit cards do you have and what kind? Do you have just normal secured cards, store cards? Because those aren't ranked as high as normal revolving lines of credit. Now, if a bank sees you only have lower tier cards like secured cards, store cards, and no normal revolving lines of credit, then of course you don't look like the most trustworthy borrower and you're not going to pass their pre-qualification test. In order to pre-qualify for this, they want to see you have anywhere at least between 3 and 5 personal credit cards. If you don't have the right cards, then 4 banks I highly recommend you getting cards with are either Chase, Amex, Bank of America, and US Bank. The reason being is because these top national banks all have 0% business credit cards that we're going to attack later to get funding. Also, since these are the top national banks, these look really good on your file versus if you just had some lower tier bank credit cards on your file. You look a lot more attractive with these top player cards on your credit file. Number 3, pick 3, my lord. The third thing that banks are going to look at to pre-qualify you is also what are your credit limits between those cards. Now, if you're going to be going over to Chase Bank asking for 50, 60, 75K type of cards, they'd like to see you at least on the personal side be trusted with a fair amount. So you want to be standing around at least 10K per card. The good rule of thumb in total credit on the personal side, you're going to want to have anywhere between 30 and 60K total credit limit. Now, the key here is you don't want to have more than 100K on the personal side, just because if Chase is approving you for 75K on the business side, but they see you have 100K plus on the personal side, it gets lenders very fishy and a little uneasy with lending you money because they're going to be like, what the heck? Why would I give you 75K on the business side if you already have 100 on the personal side? It makes you look like you have potential to over leverage on the personal and business. So we want to avoid that completely and just stay in that hot 30 to 60, no more than 100K range. Number 4 is what is your overall utilization rate? Now, banks are going to be determining how much they're going to give you in funding based off of that. General rule of thumb, you want to stay below 30% and really 30% per card. You don't want to have one card that's maxed out and all the other ones with no utilization. In general, you want to have below 30% across the board, just because if they see you over 30%, it looks like you're going to be maxing out your cards and you're going to be relying too much on the business credit side. If you can't even take care of your personal credit card debts, what makes you think that they're going to want to lend you on the business credit side? So keep that utilization below 30%. Almost halfway there. Stick with me. And if you've been getting some value so far, please drop me a follow, subscribe to my YouTube, and leave any comments or questions or concerns in the box below. Freeze! Number 5. is, do you have any negatives on your file? If so, what kind and how many of each? You know, if you have something like bankruptcies, late payments, collections, anything like that, it's not going to make a good case for banks or any sort of lender to want to trust you. Don't worry if you don't have a clean file. It's not the end of the world. Now, when you have negatives on your file, they stay on your file for 7 years. Ain't nobody got time for that. So what we're going to do is, instead of having to wait for them to naturally fall off, we're going to go through what's called the credit repair dispute process. With that credit repair dispute process, you're sending legal letters and communications to get those negatives removed. And essentially, those negatives have 30 days to prove you wrong. And if they can't, then they legally have to get it removed off your file. I'm not going to go super in depth on credit repair. I'll save that for another video, but just know your options are not limited to just having to wait for them to fall off. You do have ways to fast track instead of waiting 7 years to get those bad boys removed in just a matter of a couple months. Number 6, how many hard inquiries do you have only within the last 6 months? You're gonna wanna know for each bureau, because again, each bank might check either Experian or just Equifax or TransUnion, or all three or two of the three. Now, the reason why we only care about within the last 6 months is because inquiries, they stay on your file for 2 years, but really they only care within the last 6 months. Inquiries, they don't hurt your file too much, but if they see you rack up a ton of inquiries on your credit file, it looks like you're seeking a lot of funding. And if it looks like you're money hungry for funding, it makes it look like you're not the most attractive borrower and they won't want to give you any more money. So general rule of thumb, keep it no more than 2. Sometimes you can get away with 3, but no more than 2 within the last 6 months. Number 7, 7 heaven. What is your credit history age? Now, banks, they're gonna wanna see that you've had credit or have been trusted with credit for quite some time now, because if you just started your credit file, who do you think they're gonna trust? Somebody who has built a relationship with lending for 10 years plus, or somebody who barely started 10 months ago? Obviously the first one, right? So general rule of thumb, you're gonna wanna have at least 5 years of credit history under your belt. The longer, the better. Now, that is why I always advocate to getting that credit history age as long as you can. One awesome hack you could do to increase your credit history age is get added to what's called a authorized user. With authorized users, you basically get to adopt somebody else's credit file on their card. So if that file has perfect payment history, large credit limits, no late payments, and especially long credit age, then you get to adopt that on your file, and now your average age history is gonna boost up. 8 is your fate, and we are almost done. The 8th thing that banks are going to look at to get you that $250,000 funding is they're going to see how old your LLC is. Now, it kind of determines from bank to bank. Some banks won't care, but some of them do. That's why I wanted to add it in here. Really, they want to see you have at least a year under your belt for an LLC. Now, something you do want to understand is banks don't care too much on the age. If anyone's ever trying to sell you an age self-corporation for 0% business credit, I don't think it's the most honest thing, because they really don't care. I've been approved when I started my Airbnb business. It was barely a month and a half old, and I got approved for a 25 and a 50K card in a matter of weeks of just starting it. So it doesn't need to be too old. It just really depends on the bank. But general rule of thumb, at least have 1 year under your belt. That's all you need. Last one, let's go. So before I get to the last one, if you've stuck with me this far and gotten a lot of value from it, what are you doing already? Drop a follow, give me a like, subscribe, peace out, and I love you. 9 is fine. Will you be mine? All right, so this is the final last one, is what state is your LLC registered in? You're gonna wanna know this because not all banks you could bank with based off of where you're at. Now, obviously the major national ones like Chase, Amex, Wells Fargo, all those big ones are nationwide, but there's hundreds of 0% business credit cards out there that are specific to your state, city, county, local level. So you're gonna wanna make sure you know which state your LLC is structured and can operate in, because this is what's gonna determine which cards you could get at the local level. What we learned so far: if you want to get access to over $250,000 in 0% interest business credit funding, you need to understand that there's a secret 9-list pre-qualifying criteria that banks are going to look at to determine if they're even going to take the time to consider working with you. Now, Thank you guys so much for sticking with me and bearing with me, listening to my stupid rhymes. And, you know, I really hope you guys got a lot of value from it. If you did, if you haven't already, give me a like and subscribe. Leave any questions in the comments. I'm here to help. And as usual, this is MTV. The M is for Miggle, money, and motivation. And as usual, peace out, much love, stay beautiful. I'll see you in the next one.